River, and he will speak about MyKolab.
Thank you. So, lightning talk to MyKolab, just very few words to begin about Kolab, the technology itself, which MyKolab, the service, is based upon. So Kolab is a grouper solution, which means email, calendaring, address book, tasks, and files. It has a server side that does the whole web interface. In fact, we are supporting the Roundcube community rather actively. So the interface for Kolab is the Roundcube webmailer plus modules for the other functions. We have active sync support, CalDev, CardDev, and WebDev, so you can synchronize all sorts of devices to it. In fact, all of this was refactored over the past years. We were very happy last year at FOSDEM to essentially show off the clean stack. Towards the middle of last year, we finished the file module, and so this is now the very first time that we have the full refactor stack on the server side. Kolab itself is a bit older, in fact, by now. It goes back to 2002-ish, when the German Office for Information Security, which is part of the German government, required a grouper solution that they could trust, that they could use for their own in-house purposes, and to them that meant it had to be 100% free software, and it should be as open standards based as humanly possible. And the result of that development project that came out of this was Kolab, which then turned into the Kolab solution and has been evolving from there. Kolab Systems, which is where I am the CEO, was founded in 2010 in Switzerland, and we are now the primary developer in an open community process of the Kolab technology. It is important to us, and hopefully also to you, that Kolab is 100% free software. There is no proprietary component anywhere. Also not in the enterprise version. There's also no relicensing, none of that stuff going on, right? None. And that's important to all of us. It's close to our hearts. So, developed as a collaboration technology with a strong server side, also a desktop client that runs on Windows, on Linux, with a clear focus based on security. Normally, traditionally, people would install this at home or in their company, and it would be run on-premise, as you would call that. That is the traditional way of doing this. But as we developed Kolab, we again and again got people who came to us and said, I really want to use Kolab, but I'm not technical enough to set it up, or I don't want to run my own mail server. Can't you save me the hassle of doing so? So at some point, there was a certain threshold internally passed where we figured, all right, if we hear this so often, maybe people actually would be willing to use this. And so for FOSDEM, last year, in fact, we launched MyKolab as a beta. So it was just in time for the last FOSDEM where we said, look guys, we've just set up a server here. You can just register. For now, it's going to be a non-paid service, so for free, as in beer. We will want to move this to an actual paid service at some point in time, because we thought that there should be a demand out there for people who prefer not to be the product, who prefer to pay for that kind of service in actual money and make it a clean transaction where they know exactly both ends of the transaction, because you do not know, in particular, the economics of the site when you are data mined, how that works. You don't know the price you're paying, really. And we were convinced some people should be interested in actually not being data mined and would be willing to pay for that service. So we said, let's give it a try. We launched MyKolab and saw a good number of signups. Of course, as with any refactored new technology, I mean, you know how it is. People find issues. We promptly set to resolving as many of those issues as we possibly could, making, in that case, actual very good use of the diversity of devices hooking up to the service. And all of that went back into Kolab, the technology base. It is important to understand that MyKolab was the very first major deployment of that new stack. It is run by ourselves, which means we actually get to diagnose all the issues immediately, which is very nice. And everything is developed always in and for the upstream. We have a very, very strong upstream policy. Everything we do for MyKolab ends up in the upstream and in the Git repos, which everyone can consume. So if you wanted to run your own instance of this, go ahead. Be our guest. You can do this with us or without us. It is your choice. We give you the entire stack. You can do it. So that kind of looked good. It started working well. We saw very encouraging first feedback. People seemed to like it. So eventually we said, all right, actually, our feeling is there should be an actual market here for this. So, oh, nice. Go away. So, we set it up. Of course, we set it up as best we could. I mean, this is our SSL test result from Qualys. So we really tried to do this well. However, if we wanted to move this to a paid service, which we thought we should do, we figured out that ultimately, well, doing it the way we ran the beta was not sustainable because there was a single machine, right, in a data center. Secure and all that, fine, but one machine, which means you're one hardware defect away from a total service outage, which isn't necessarily what you want. Especially when people pay for it, they have a right to demand a higher availability. Therefore, we figured, all right, we need to make this more sustainable. Also, that rating means very, very little if you do not control the entire chain. I mean, an attacker will not attack your strongest spot. They will attack your weakest spot typically. They rarely ever do you the favor of attacking where you have built the gigantic fortress. They try to find the back door. And that means for any such service, of course, that first of all, the data center should be secure that you're using. Secondly, if you don't have physical control over the actual hardware that is running the service, you do not even know what is going on. So if you just rent out some service somewhere in a data center where you have no knowledge of who has access, physical access to your machine, you don't really know whether that rating means nothing because they already have the certificate and they're sitting in the middle of it. So we said, okay, we need to do this with hardware. And somewhere in the more murky regions of our company group, we actually found a set of unused hardware that was old but redundant enough. So, I mean, meaning we could lose a couple of those and still have enough power to actually run this for the number of users we saw at the time. And we figured, all right, let's give this a try. So we, not having a transporter that day, we loaded it into the car. And no, it is not meant to actually sit that low. I mean, this stuff is really, really heavy. So we had some fun, carrying it out of one data center, carrying it into the other data center, setting it all up, making it all nicely puppetized and, remote controlled. Jeroen, who's sitting here in the middle, is the head behind a lot of that. Exactly, that guy, who's also our system architect, by the way. So if you have actual deep technical questions, that man. So he set this up so that ultimately these physical servers would behave much in the way that you would expect virtual servers to behave, in the sense that they came up, they got their IP address, they pulled down their images, they got their provisioning, they got the functions that they should have, all nicely automated, spinning up and down as required. That was all sweet and dandy. We set that up solidly on a enterprise Linux stack at the time, although I think we used CentOS for that one. And so, started to move this into production. And actually, literally, we're carrying this back into the other data center where it was running for a while when Mr. Snowden released his revelations. It was literally the same day. So effectively, we realized, oh crap, we're probably not going to be able to use that hardware for very long to begin with. But secondly, of course, we suddenly saw a dramatic spike in interest. So the proposition which we thought would actually be interesting to people, namely run a service where you're not the product and get someone to not data mine you and actually give you the best privacy they can give you suddenly became a whole lot more appealing to quite a few people. And I mean, one thing that totally took us by surprise was, for instance, when PJ decided to shut down Grok and I mean, I've known PJ for quite some years. I've written for Grok in the past, and PJ and I have been in contact for a long while, and at some point, we just saw this massive spike in traffic on the web server, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And before we even knew it, that machine, which was running, I think, a Drupal instance, effectively just went out of memory and killed itself. At which point in time on Twitter you saw all the conspiracy theories about the NSA haven't gotten to us now, that PJ is with us, because ultimately, obviously now we are the prime target. It wasn't quite so dramatic. It was actually just a web server that we couldn't scale up fast enough, since frankly that spike really, really surprised us. Now what we saw, actually, and this is the actual IMAP storage space. Can you spot where that happened roughly? I mean, the effect we saw was dramatic. I mean, seriously dramatic. So it's been going up quite strongly. You see the little hitch where we threw out the beta users who did not convert to actual full users, but it's been growing dramatically ever since. And strangely enough, for us, what we have seen is that people who previously did not understand the benefit of free software started getting it, because they understood suddenly that there is something about controlling the technology. People who had never cared about this suddenly started using the service, which also means, by the way, that we now got a whole lot of other issues to deal with from users, because those were usability issues where someone expected things to work in a certain way and just tried it out, and somehow it didn't magically behave exactly that way. So for us, it was a great lesson in usability, to be honest, that made us experience things in a completely new and previously unimaginable way. However, all of that still wrapped into the initial concept with which we started, that everything goes back to the upstream. Nothing stays with us, and that's pretty much the end of it. So if you want to see more about MyKolab, please come visit us. Building K, upper level, right near the entrance. That's my contact details in case you want to get in touch. Jeroen for questions of technical nature. We have the Roundcube guys here as well. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. If you have some question, you can ask him just outdoor the room.